Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners, to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius, the official energy drink of PewterReport.com. Happy Wednesday to everybody as we try to get over the hump, inching closer to that weekend. We got a fun show in store. Hello to all the Pewter people that are filing in, as we are going to be talking about the Bucs sack projections for the 2024 season. It's a big year coming up for the Bucs defensive tackles and edge rushers. We know the Bucs can get after the quarterback, but a lot of those times it's come through the blitzes that Todd Bowles is dialing it up. And even Bowles will admit he wants to see a little bit more getting a pass rush from that defensive line. So we have our great colleague Josh Queipo joining the show today as he made these projections. And we'll go through player by player. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me, as I just mentioned, we previewed it on yesterday's show, so everybody knows he's on. The man with the plan, the Queipo to Crusader, Josh Queipo. Josh, what's going on, my man?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing well. How about yourself, buddy?
Pretty good. It's nice to get back into the swing of things. Hope you had a great 4th of July weekend, even though that feels like it just happened, but it kind of like feels like it was a while ago, too. I don't know if for whatever reason, but that's all right because that just means we're getting closer and closer to the NFL season and college football season. So where's your excitement level right now as we get closer to training camp? We're about 2 weeks away.
Yeah, that's the thing. What I love about the NFL is that, and especially in our capacity covering it, is it really is a full calendar year of covering the team and covering the league. And it's like there are different seasons, almost like the seasons of the year, seasons within the NFL year. We are so close to training camp season, and I'm super excited to see guys on the field on a consistent basis doing stuff and kind of taking the analysis that we bring and bringing it to life and seeing, are we right? Are we close? The predictions that we have, are they anywhere close to what reality is? And this is the third year in a row I've ventured to do predictions on sacks, which is a tall task. And I'm very interested to see what the viewers and the readers and the listeners think of that.
Yeah, we appreciate all your hard work with it. I mean, it's not easy to come up with these projections. And obviously, on certain players, if it's a good projection, fans are happy with it. If it's a projection where they're not expected to do as well, obviously people are unhappy with it, but you're brave enough to take up on the task. And yeah, training camp, I know Scott says he's not always as excited for training camp because he's been doing this for 30 years and this is when he'll do the old man voice and all that stuff. And I get that because he's been through it over and over. But you were able to go to training camp last year, and I've been there for the past couple of years as well. And what I find most fun about it really is we're as up close to the action as we can possibly be. When we're at practice, we're much further back, but at training camp, you're right along the sidelines with the fans, which is always fun to see. And you never know what new storyline's going to be there. And I don't even mean with the Buccaneers specifically. I like the storylines of, hey, this guy's pretty fat coming into the season, or, oh my God, this training camp, this person's a training camp holdout. They want a new contract and they've taken it from OTAs into training camp as well. So I'm super excited for it. By the way, I want to get your opinion on it. And if any of the Pewter people want to chime in as well, because last night I was watching the Hard Knocks that's going on with the New York Giants front office. And for those that may not know, Hard Knocks obviously has been big with the NFL. The Bucs were on it years ago when Dirk Cutter was the coach and Jameis was the quarterback. But they usually do it for training camp. But Hard Knocks has done this interesting thing this year where they're still going to do the regular training camp. I don't remember what team's doing it. But for right now, they are looking into the front office of the New York Giants. And the first episode, which I watch, it's obviously coming off the heels of the season. They got a lot going on with Saquon Barkley and how they're going to help out Daniel Jones. And it shows them at the East-West Shrine and the Senior Bowl, which Pewter Report was at. But I'm just curious, knowing how much you enjoy the contracts and the GM side of things, did you get to see it? And what have you thought so far?
So I'm very excited to watch it. I haven't watched it yet because I feel like I have to for something like that, I'm going to have to binge it. So I'm kind of waiting for all of the episodes to be available so I can just power through in a day, because I am not a patient person. When Netflix first got to streaming and they started doing their own content, and it was, it was like everything you could binge, I was all about it. I'm 2 or 3 episodes behind on House of Dragons right now because I'm like, you know what? All right. I'm going to wait for the whole season so I can just power through. So I'm very excited about it. I think that this will be the Hard Knocks that I really enjoy the most, but I haven't seen them yet because I'm waiting for them to all be available.
I respect the move. I kind of fall in between. Some shows I like to binge watch beginning to end. Others, I need to watch it right away. And then I kind of like the discussions, the theories, all the stuff that's going to happen week in and week out. Honestly, my bread and butter is getting into a popular show after like it's been on TV for 4 or 5 seasons. So I'll binge watch the first 4 seasons. That's what I did with Game of Thrones. And then I caught up to it by season 5. So I had the best of both worlds. Shout out Miley Cyrus, who might be hosting the Super Bowl this year or performing at the Super Bowl, where you get to binge watch and then you get to do the, hey, I'm watching it this Sunday, and then let's all talk and see what's going to happen in between.
So I just wrapped the first 4 seasons of Stranger Things earlier this week.
Oh, okay.
So I started it, I want to say a week ago, and I got through all 4 seasons in about 8 or 9 days, which was nice. I would say a feat considering the 4th season, each one's like basically a mini movie.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that last season, I watched it all, but like it's been a while since I watched it. But obviously everyone remembers that song, like, you're running up that hill. Yeah, like that whole thing. So yeah, everyone like that. But yeah, to bring it back to Hard Knocks, I'm looking forward to when you do watch it, because I think you will be a huge fan of it, which will well, I like to see you happy, so I think you will be delighted watching to see it. By the way, shout out to the Pewter people that are just joining. John Close started the show with "What's up" or "What's up, good Pewter people." Jason saying double-digit sacks for Yaya Diaby this year. Gaming Reaper giving a shout out to Josh. Gaming Reaper saying caught Josh live with Real Bucs Talk, now with Pewter Report, loving it. # more Queipo.
I will appreciate it. Thank you.
I agree with that, Gaming Reaper. The more Queipo, the better. I agree. I got a couple other people as well. By the way, we can't get into every single comment, but if you want to super chat us, we will make sure we get to that comment, because if you want to super chat us, you get to cut the line, and we will address whatever statement or question that you have. So we're going to get into the 2024 projections. But Josh, first of all, you went back and reviewed your 2023 projections for the Buccaneers. You wrote an article about it as well. How did the final results pair up with your overall projections from a season ago?
You know, it was my best, I would say my best season yet in terms of the predictions. Trying to pull it up right now, but for most of them, I was pretty darn close on either the total pressures, the pressure rate, or even the sacks in general. I would say probably my boldest take from 2023 was that Anthony Nelson was not going to repeat his sack season from the year before. I was pretty much on the nose there. I predicted that JTS would have more sacks because and we'll get kind of into the nuts and bolts of what I'm talking, some of these terms and whatnot, but that his pressure to conversion rate, which is not something that is predictive year over year, had been low his first 2 years. Basically, he wasn't converting as many pressures as you would expect a league average rate to be, and I expected that to improve. And it did. So I was very pleased with the overall kind of how close I was for the team.
Yeah, man, between your projections for sacks and defensive stats for players and the salary contracts that, you projected for like Antoine Winfield Jr. and Baker and Mike Evans, you were on a roll. So I'm going to ask you for some lottery numbers. I'm going to ask you for some over-unders and see what you come up with there, because, yeah, I mean, obviously it's very difficult to be 100%, but, if this was Moneyball, Brad Pitt would be signing you.
I would accept in a heartbeat.
All right, let's get into the 2024 projections. The way we're going to go about this is we will start with the defensive line, go through all the defensive tackles, and then work our way to the outside linebackers. So we're talking about all of the defensive front, and why not start with probably their best defensive tackle on the team? Obviously, his very young teammate going into his second year may have something to say about that when it's all said and done this year. But let's start off with team captain and team leader Vita Vea. So, Josh, you have Vita Vea getting a 12.5% pressure rate, 41 pressures, and 5 sacks on the season. Why don't we start off with, if you can, maybe tell us a little bit behind the process of kind of like coming up with these, allocated snaps and the rates and everything like that, if you can.
Yeah. So I think that I got to go back, that 12.5% pressure rate. I think I mistyped that. So
Okay.
just doing the quick math in my head, it actually should be a little under 10%, but the 41 pressures and the 5 sacks is correct. And I should have caught that pre-show, but the process there is the biggest predictors for sacks for any player is going to be their overall pressure rate and then how many pass rush snaps they get. From there, you get how many pressures they would have on the season. And then for the most part, I apply league average rates of what I call a conversion rate. How many or what percentage of your pressures are you converting into a sack? What I've found through my research is that there is no, with the exception of TJ Watt. TJ Watt is the guy who breaks the rule. There's no predictiveness to how often you convert pressures into sacks. So one year you may convert 20% of your pressures into a sack. The next year it may be 30, but there's no way to tell which season's going to be what. So I've found that by and large, interior rushers tend to convert as a group over a large sample size about 11 to 12% of their pressures into sacks. And then edge rushers at somewhere around 16 to 18% of their pressures turn into sacks. And so I typically will apply those rates to what I've predicted for their pressures to get the overall sacks. The other thing that I'll note is that when I say sacks, I'm using the Pro Football Focus version of a sack, which is you get a full credit for a sack, even if somebody else helps you sack the quarterback. So where Pro Football Reference, NFL themselves, they would credit somebody with half a sack. Pro Football Focus says you can't help that somebody else was really good at getting to the quarterback. You get full credit. You'll see some of these predictions. I do actually predict a half sack, which basically means I'm taking placing an over-under on within a half a sack. So if I have 5.5 as the prediction, it means I think it'll be either 5 or 6. So I think those are a few of the things. So going to Vita specifically, the big thing with Vita Vea, I'm predicting he will have the most pass rush snaps since like 2019 for him. I'm buying that he will be on the field more because of his now svelte physique, the trimmed down weight, that he will be able to play more. And so a lot of his sack production, I'm predicting, will come just in increased opportunities, that 425 pass rush snaps. From there, I actually think that I apologize because it's a typo in my article and you guys just pulled it straight from that. I think his pressure rate is going to be about 9.5%, which gives you the 41 pressures. Now that would be the second year in a row where Vea is below 10% on pressure rate. And for interior defensive linemen, that 10%, that double-digit rate is kind of what creates like somebody who's in the upper echelons as a pass rusher. So I do think that Vita's kind of on the downside of his career. He's going to be 30 at the end of this season. And I just think that, he's starting to slow down a little bit in terms of his efficiency as a pass rusher. But 41 pressures from a defensive tackle is still a very good number. And from there, I do think that he'll hit about 5 sacks. From a nose tackle, 5 sacks is a phenomenal pass rush number. 41 pressures is a phenomenal pass rush result. So very good for the position he plays, but starting to see a little bit of decline from Vita on an efficiency basis.
Right. And Vita's going into his 1, 2, 3, like he's going into his 7th year. Like,
Yeah.
especially for, not every position is the same. Like Mike Evans obviously is going into his 11th season, but a wide receiver, while they do take a lot of hits, you're also able to kind of weather the storm a bit of taking a hit. You can pull the Tyler Lockett and go down early as he does a lot, or, oh my God, I'm going to sneeze. Or you can have plays like where you're going to go out of bounds or whatever it may be. Defensive tackle, you don't have that luxury. Like you're getting smashed every single play, or you're smashing people. That's just the nature of the position. That's how it goes about. But I mean, the number of sacks that you have with 5, understanding that the pressure rate might be a little bit different, and the snaps and everything like that, it's really not far off from his production, even going back to 2021. He had 4 sacks then, 6.5 in 2022, and 5.5 last year. So you're really not seeing a crazy drop off. And you're kind of hoping in that same sentiment as well. Well, if Vita isn't maybe getting the sacks like he was in 2021, that's hopefully and probably because someone else along that defensive line or at edge rusher is getting the job done, which we've talked about has been a little bit of an issue. Let me ask you this. You did touch on the fact that Vita has slimmed down, and that should most likely help him. What about the fact, and I know he played majority of the season once the bye week was done, but Kijah Cancey, obviously going into year 2, being hopefully fully healthy into the season, how much did that kind of factor into the output that Vita Vea could get? Because, only so many people can make a play on one snap.
Yeah. I think that the combination thereof has me a little bit higher than I normally would have been for Vita. And like I said, I think the big thing is it just gives him more opportunities. So getting those two on the field as much as possible together, I think is one of the keys to success for the Bucs defense this year. Because I do, and you'll see it in just a second, because I'm sure we'll kind of move to Cancey next. I am very bullish on Cancey for year 2. And I think, and I apologize, my dog goes crazy whenever somebody
it's all
is
good,
near
man.
the door.
We're a pet friendly show.
I appreciate that.
Friendly show.
Give me 1 second here.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, the next person we are going to get into is Kijah Cancey anyway. So we can segue that. I also see a couple people angry in the chats as well. Bat W, we know we love you. So if you want to boo me, that's fine. I wasn't personally trying to avoid you. If you want to boo me, hey, somebody's got to be the bad guy. But no, I wasn't specifically trying to overlook you. We appreciate you always being in the comments, and Gaming Reaper saying pet friendly, my dude.
Well, I'm glad we're pet friendly, because she's come a long way, but she's still very, very skeptical of strangers. So I apologize.
What kind of dog do you have?
We've got 2. So the one you hear in the background is Lila. She is a pit mix. And then we've got a chocolate lab named Boone. You typically won't hear him unless Lila barks too much, and then he barks at her to let her know to shut up. So, right. So we've got her calm here. I'm trying to hold on to her here. But you kind of segueing into Kijah Cancey, and I don't know if you can.
Josh, can I cut you off very briefly?
Absolutely.
Because I have a segue. So you have several dogs in your house. The Bucs are hoping they have a bunch of dogs along the defensive line and at outside linebacker. So yes, let's talk about Kijah Cancey now. Sorry,
I like it.
That was perfect. I had it in my gut. And I had to let it out. I could not just let it fester there. But anyway, please proceed. Yeah.
So with Cancey, I'm very bullish. I think that this is going to be a big step towards him becoming one of the premier interior pass rushers in the NFL. And so I actually have him with an 11.5% pressure rate, which would be, I want to say 2.6% better than what he did last year. I also have him leading the Bucs interior defensive lineman with 450 pass rush snaps, which anything less, unless he's not healthy, right, I think would be an egregious mistake by the Bucs defensive staff. keep him on the field on third down, get him into those pass rushing situations, because that's where he's going to be elite. That would lead to 52 pressures and 6.5 sacks. And to give some context to those two numbers, among interior defensive linemen last year in the NFL who had more than 52 pressures, I'm trying to pull it up right now. And of course, my internet's running a little bit slow.
That's the internet is not always our friend.
That would have tied him for 8th in the league with Quinnen Williams, right? The only guys who had more than 52 pressures last year from interior defensive linemen. I'm sorry, I'm looking at 2022. Should have been 2023. It would put him top 10. And the 6.5 sacks, again, would probably put him top 10 to top 15. So from a second-year interior defensive lineman, that's really, really incredible. So, yeah, 52 pressures would have made him tied for 12th last year. I'm sorry. And 6.5 sacks would have him somewhere around, 12th to 20th. So from your second-year first-round pick, that's exactly what you want to see in terms of a growth pattern from him year 1 to year 2. So very bullish on Kijah Cancey, very bullish on the usage for Vita Vea in terms of increased usage. And I think that they can highlight this pass rush and finally start to give the Bucs a little bit more from their 4-man rush, so that Todd Bowles' blitz package doesn't become the basis of their pass rush, but more of the cherry on top.
Yeah, I love how you just played that all out, because that's the other side of it with Vita Vea as well. If Vita's getting 5 sacks, but you have another defensive tackle getting 6.5, that means Vita doesn't have to do as much, because even when Vita was rocking and rolling in this defense, there really wasn't another defensive tackle that was kind of putting up those sack numbers. And understandably, it's much more tougher for a defensive lineman to really dominate and get after the quarterback the way that an edge rusher does. But yeah, I mean, even looking at last year, Vita Vea had 5.5 sacks. The next closest defensive tackle was actually Kijah Cancey at 4, and that was in 14 games. And obviously, we all know he missed the beginning of the season because of that calf injury. And then the next person really wasn't until Greg Gaines, who had 1 sack on the year. And we'll talk about Greg Gaines momentarily. But man, like when I watch Kijah Cancey, and shout out to Brian Baldinger with some of his video.
A lot on him, yeah.
Baldy's the man, great man from Massapequa. Shout out to the town, Massapequa, and Massapequa Park. But like the way, first of all, the video of him and Kijah Cancey on the beach is so funny. Because like the time that it was first aired, really, or put on social media, I guess I should say, it just kind of seemed like Baldinger was on the beach and was like, huh? Kijah Cancey? You know what I mean? Like, just kind of funny to think like, hey, let's meet up at the beach and like do some drills there or anything. But, Cancey's obviously taking it very seriously. He went to the SAC Summit. I'm very excited to see what he has to say about the SAC Summit, which I'm sure he will get asked about, or I'll go and ask him too once training camp arrives about, what that whole deal was like. But man, I mean, what I like about him that I think Yaya Diaby doesn't have yet is Cancey has the speed, and Yaya has speed too. But Cancey just feels like he's got all the moves ready to go right away. Like he seems like a karate master, just a chop here, a chop there, good to go. And he's getting to the quarterback. He's got some quick twitch moves that you love to see from a guy right out of the gate. I mean, there are a lot of guys, and Yaya could get to this where it takes him another season or two to really develop those moves, and then you got the full arsenal, and then you're ready to go. But Kijah Cancey kind of came out of the gate once he was fully healthy and showed that he was able to get after the quarterback. So now, with the whole year under his belt and everything that he's been saying in front of the podium and press conferences, proving it by going to the SAC Summit, I mean, this guy is as motivated as really anybody in the league. And I think there's a reason. Sarah Walsh, for the NFL reporter, she's had a lot of Bucs training camp practices, and, she's had OTAs and everything. She talked about Kijah and Yaya, but Kijah specifically is these underrated guys that maybe the national public isn't as familiar with. But let's remember, Kijah Cancey was the Rookie of the Month in November of last year. So, he's been put on the map, and I'm excited to see what he'll do in year 2.
Yeah, he was the second defensive tackle taken in last year's draft behind Jalen Carter. But he was absolutely the most developed in terms of repertoire and pass rush plan and just ability to hit an offensive lineman with multiple moves or successive moves. And just he was the most developed prospect in terms of pass rusher in that draft. The thing that kept him from being the first defensive tackle is just the physical traits. Jalen Carter was bigger with similar, in terms of testing scores. And people had legitimate concerns about Cancey's size because there have only been a couple of guys who have been successful at that size. Most famously, the now retired Aaron Donald, but even Ed Oliver, who played Buffalo for a long time. He's
off-ball defensive tackle.
Off-ball defensive tackle. Shout out to Trevor and John. Oliver's been very successful, not to Donald's level, but nobody's been to Donald's level.
Right,
so,
exactly.
Small sample size there. The Bucs bet that Kijah could be the third in that kind of mold, and year 1 was very promising.
Very, very true. Another thing that's very promising because it always delivers, of course, is Celsius Energy Drinks, the official energy drink of PewterReport.com. Sometimes watching Vita Vea and particularly Kijah Cancey play at defensive tackle, it feels like they had just chugged the Celsius Energy Drink and then went on to go play the lovely, lovely sport that we are huge fans of called football. Of course, Celsius, they got so many amazing, fantastic flavors, especially a lot of the Vibe flavors, whether it's the Galaxy, Astro, or Cosmic Vibe. I love the Arctic Vibe. That's my personal favorite. There's no sugar in Celsius Energy Drink. Shout out to the Tropical as well. There's no sugar. It's gluten-free as well. It's a great substitute for coffee in the morning if you want something a little bit different to kickstart your day. So if you need to know where to find a Celsius Energy Drink, head on over to the Celsius store locator on their website. Punch in your address, and it'll tell you the closest location where you can pick one up. Could be a Walmart, a health and fitness store, a convenience store, 7-Eleven, or your bodega.
Bodega.
Hell yeah, you went deep for that one. And once you keep going to your local bodega and you know you want more, you can buy more. You can get it in bulk. I recommend buying that variety pack. Variety is the spice of life. There's so many awesome flavors of Celsius. And you can do that on Amazon. Have it sent to your place of residence whenever you want. You're in charge. You're the captain. Just make sure you're drinking Celsius Energy Drinks, the official energy drink of PewterReport.com. Okay. Next on this list, sticking with defensive tackles, we'll save some of the more polarizing defensive tackles for the last of the group. So next up, we are going to be talking about Greg Gaines, who is back again on another one-year deal. Of course, holding up the Washington pipeline, that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, with several Washington players on offense and defense, a little more towards the defensive side. Well, actually, no, that's not true because they drafted Jalen McMillan this year. But anyway, Greg Gaines, you have him at 265 pass rushing snaps, 4.25% of a pressure rate, 11 pressures, and 1.5 sacks on the season. So you actually have an improvement as far as sacks go for Greg Gaines by a half a sack or a full sack if we're talking about Pro Football Focus. But Josh, your reasoning behind this these numbers and really just what you kind of expect from Greg Gaines this season, just as an overall defensive tackle versus stat projections.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gaines is a great reserve or depth run defending defensive tackle. I think that's what he's kind of been for most of his career, somebody who can hold up well, especially in a Todd Bowles defense. He's gap sound. But as a pass rusher, there's kind of an outlier season for him, which was 2021 when he generated almost 40 pressures. Outside of that, you look at his other 4 years, and it's like 37 pressures on almost 800 pass rushing snaps. It's not his forte. Every once in a while, he can push a pocket a little bit, but he's just not a pass rusher, and that's okay. That's not what the Bucs need him to be. He's a rotational nose tackle is basically what they use him as to spell Vita. And so because of that, you're not going to see a lot of pressures. He had 11 pressures last year. I haven't predicted for the same amount of pressures this year. And then the sack, it's again, a little bit of variance in terms of the conversion rate. He was just slightly unlucky last year. 1 sack on 11 pressures is about a 9% conversion rate. League average is around 11 to 12. And that's where I get that extra half a sack. So really what I'm saying is he'll probably, again, by Pro Football Focus's measure, come in with a 1 again or 2, somewhere in.
Yeah, I mean, he's in this group more to stop the run, to kind of spell some of the other guys, give them a break. So honestly, I would have been shocked if you're like, he's going to get 4 sacks this year, because that's not what.
And most likely, the sacks that he's going to get are probably not driven by his own pass rushing talent. It'll most likely be somebody else. A coverage sack or a quarterback trying to, move away from somebody winning at the edge, moves up in the pocket. Oh, Greg Gaines was there. So
right. Or the classic botch snap that the quarterback has to jump on the ball and Greg Gaines closes the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
That was like Michael Strahan's, like when he broke the sack record. Like Favre just fell to the ground pretty much because he didn't want to
gave it to him.
Really get tackled. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would suck obviously that was a record breaking thing and it was still very cool. But like that would suck. Someone's like first career sack and it's like you just go boop and bam, sack. Like that's how it's done. But let me ask you.
Give me that ball. I want to hold that ball for the rest of my life.
Yeah,
and
right.
Tell this story.
Can I get the quarterback's wristband after the game? I want to put it up. Never forget when Andrew Adams got 3 interceptions against Cam Newton, because I remember he said like, "Oh, I got like a special mantle in my house," and I forgot where, but and he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna hang that up for like the big game that he had." Shout out to Andrew Adams. Played a big role in that the NFC Championship game when Jordan Whitehead got hurt and he had to play in the second half. So, and Antoine Winfield Jr. did not play in that game. Now that I recall, I believe he was injured for that one.
That was a good poll.
Yeah. Random fun facts, people always forget, like the winners write the history book. So you don't say like, oh, well, the Bucs are depleted and, Matt LaFleur is an idiot and didn't go for it on 4th down. Like, you don't really hear that part of it. You just hear Scotty Miller and Cam Brate touchdown and Jordan Whitehead forced fumble and, all that fun stuff. Anyway, back to Greg Gaines. See, I always tend to go off on segues or tangents.
I love your tangents.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I try to keep it Bucs centric. You never know. For Gaines, would you prefer if the Bucs used him slightly more, slightly less, or just keep him at the same kind of trajectory that he was at?
So philosophically, and Scott Reynolds and I have talked about this a lot. Todd Bowles uses his defensive line in a slightly unique way. He doesn't really have pass rush specialists and run stop defending specialists. He truly uses kind of like a rotation, right? So usually the first 2 drives are going to be your starters. The 3rd drive is going to be like a full 4-man switch into the backups. And then kind of like rotate, usually like a 2-to-1 from there. I would much rather see a bit more of a specialized role. If it's 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 8, I don't want Greg Gaines on the field. I want Kijah Cancey and Vita Vea on the field. I'd rather see fans will flame me for this. I'd rather see JTS out there on 3rd and 7 or 8, along with Yaya, Diaby, and not necessarily Anthony Nelson. So philosophically, I would like to see Greg Gaines's pass rush snaps decrease, but his overall snaps stay relatively the same, and just really allow him to focus in on his strengths, which is defending the run.
I could not agree with you more, Josh. I wish Todd Bowles would do something like that where, to your point, someone like Marquise Watts, who showed that he can really do big things on 3rd down. I would love to see him in that type of situation where, okay, maybe he's not playing 1st or 2nd down, but he can pin his ears back and really let it go on 3rd down. That would be something I would love to see. And obviously the other side of that is that Greg Gaines is not on 3rd down. But I think that's fine. And really no Bucs fan would have an issue with that. No one's going, man, if they just played Greg Gaines a little bit more on 3rd down, like that group would impress a lot more. And I'm not, taking any shots at Greg Gaines, of course. But anyway, let's move on to the second to last defensive tackle we're going to discuss, but also probably vilified's not the right word, but someone that is not beloved by Bucs fans until he really proves it this season. That, of course, is Logan Hall. So for Logan Hall, his 2024 predictions, you have 300 pass rush snaps for Logan, 6% on the pressure rates, 18 pressures, and 2.5 sacks. This is a big year for Logan Hall, Josh. They kind of have already addressed defensive tackle with going with Kijah Cancey last year, but they could be in another situation where, maybe they probably don't pick a defensive tackle in the first round. Never say never. You got to see how the board, shapes up. But if Logan Hall doesn't put together a solid year, I don't think the Bucs are going to really hope and pray that he's kind of going to put it together really at any point in his career.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very telling that, we at Pewter Report have kind of gleaned that if Graham Barton wasn't there in the first round, if he had been selected before the Bucs were picking in the first round, there's a good chance that the pick would have been a defensive tackle.
Yeah, Johnny Newton.
And I think that tells you a lot in terms of what the team thinks of Logan Hall. Chris, we'll get to it later in terms of JTS, but Chris Braswell being selected in the second round, I think it tells you a lot of what the team thinks of a couple of high draft picks from a few years ago. And I don't project a ton of improvement from Logan Hall 2023 to 2024. Last year, he had 17 pressures on 326 pass rush snaps. I'm predicting a few less snaps and one extra pressure. So if you want to call that a step forward, I would say it's more of a toe forward, if you will. I am predicting an improvement in the sack totals because he was unlucky in terms of the conversion rate. If you have 18 pressures, you should be getting 1 to 2 sacks, or 17 pressures last year, and he had none. And again, that's a very, very volatile conversion rate, is extremely volatile. So just kind of using that league average, I've got him with, I think, 2.5 there. So a little bit of a step forward from the things that the fans care more about, sacks, obviously. It takes me back to like the late 90s. I don't know if you remember this. Being a Mets fan, you might, because the Braves probably haunted your dreams. But there was that great commercial with Tom Glavine and Greg Maddux where they ditched pitching and started hitting homers because chicks dig the long ball.
I know that saying. I don't really recall
that's
that commercial, but yeah.
It was in 98. I think it was during the middle of the Sosa McGuire home run, chasing Maris's record. And they did this great little promotion where Glavine and Maddux were just pissed that Sosa and McGuire were getting all the love for that home run chase. So they both kind of like, in the commercial, they bulk up and they start hitting a bunch of BP home runs, and they're like, chicks dig the long ball. Well, sacks are the long ball of defensive line, right? So
very true. Very true.
I'm predicting a move forward in Logan Hall's long ball, if you will, with 2.5 sacks.
Yeah. All right. So we'll say Logan Hall, maybe not on the Barry Bonds level just yet, but, maybe has a Chris Davis type of year where no one really expects it, and then something big happens. And then Chris Davis got that big contract and never started hitting home runs again. Yep. There was someone else years ago that just
Brady Anderson for the
Brady,
Baltimore Orioles.
Brady or Grady?
Grady Anderson. Sorry,
Grady. Grady Anderson. Just 1 year he hit 55 homers and then never hit 20 again.
Yeah, I think it was 53. He'd never had more than 18 before that. Never did anything close to it after. So.
Yeah. Great tangent. Great, love a good tangent. The All-Star game is right around the corner. America's classic. Speaking of classics, so if Logan Hall is, let's just say, not beloved by Bucs fans, this next player very much is beloved by Bucs fans. A friend of the program, has been on several times now. Of course, Will Gholston back for yet another year, a long-time veteran of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So you have 75 pass rushing snaps, 4% pressure rate, 3 pressures, and no sacks on the season. So this basically comes down to, Will Gholston's there for his veteran presence, leadership, and what he means to the guys in the locker room, and probably will not be utilized much at defensive tackle because his snaps have really declined over the last 3 years. And his highlight play was the interception against Buffalo, which was nice, but that was more of a freak play that Will Gholston happened to be there versus like Will Gholston made a play.
Yeah. He, the most pass rushing snaps he's had in any season was 2020 when he had 365. And it's been a bit of a steady decline from there. It's becoming a little bit more exponential with each passing season. He went from 365 in 2020 to 295 to 222. Last year was 115. And I see that continuing downtrend. Still a solid run defender in this top Bulls defense.
Yeah.
But he's 34, I want to say now, if I remember correctly. It just doesn't. I'm sorry, he's 33. He'll be 33 next month. Just doesn't quite have the juice left as a pass rusher, and the Bucs aren't asking him to be that. I think, like you said, a veteran presence to help develop some of these other guys. The hope is that Logan Hall becomes Will Gholston, prime Will Gholston here in the next couple of years. Also, just the throwback to Will Gholston being on the show saying Logan Hall is the next JJ Watt.
Yes.
Gotta bring that up for this particular topic. I do not forecast a JJ Watt season for Logan Hall this year. Maybe next year.
Hey, well, if Will's getting into the hot take business, which, a lot of people disagree with, but it does
move into media.
It does get eyeballs. So he is in the hot take business, but obviously Will Gholston, a fan of Bucs fans, because obviously, Bucs fans really care about the guys that went through the hard times and then were able to get through it, like Andy Dufresne getting through the mud and then seeing, the success that the Bucs had, winning the Super Bowl and making the postseason the last 4 years. So
he was running up that hill, if you will.
Yes, there you go. Make a deal with God. So, I want Will to play for as long as he wants to keep playing, whether it's just this season, maybe it's 2 more seasons, 4 more seasons, 5, who knows? But, whenever he does decide to hang it up, I hope he, as they say, sails off into the sunset, if you will, or maybe cruises into the sunset, much like you can on the Buccaneers cruise coming up in March.
We're on the Bucs cruise. Of course we're playing pool volleyball.
Hey, we on the Bucs cruise, of course. Anytime I say Tampa, they will say Bay. Tampa! Hey! Tampa! Hey! Tampa! Hey!
We're on the Bucs cruise. Of course, I've got my Super Bowl 37 hardware. What do you think?
We're on the Bucs cruise, and of course we had a pirate night. Arr!
Arr!
That's right, folks. The Tampa Bay Bucs cruise coming up soon. Join sooner rather than later. Join the fun with hundreds of Bucs fans on the 3rd annual Tampa Bay Bucs cruise, which sets sail from March 7th through the 10th in 2025 on the beautiful Celebrity Silhouette ship. This is a 3-night cruise that begins in Fort Lauderdale and visits Key West and Bimini in the Bahamas. Last year's cruise had Yaya Diaby, Rashad White, Luke Gedeke, Cade Otton, Mr. 1.5 sacks projected by Josh Queipo this year, Greg Gaines, Jamel Dean, Christian Izien, Super Bowl 37 MVP Dexter Jackson, Hall of Famer Warren Sapp, who we spoke about a lot on yesterday's show, Gene Deckerhoff, back for another season calling Bucs games on radio. Even more players are expected next year. Maybe Tristan Wirfs will make a return. We shall see. And there's going to be a special guest appearance by Derek Brooks. There will be photo and autograph opportunities with players, a Raise the Flag sail-away party, VIP parties with the players, special player interviews, and a water volleyball challenge, which I'm very excited about, and Bucs trivia contest, fun games, and more. So reserve your cabin now on the 2025 Tampa Bay Bucs cruise, where drinks, including alcohol, Wi-Fi, and tips are all included with a $200 deposit per person. That's refundable until August 16th. So you got about a month and a week left. Visit TampaBayBucsCruise.com or give them a call at 1-800-975-7112. That's 1-800-975-7112. Okay, we are going to talk about the outside linebacker position just next. But first, Josh, you've had a great article series really ranking every position, not just of the Buccaneers, but the entire NFC South. And you've gone position by position. And coming up next, actually later today, is going to be outside linebacker. So,
Yeah,
you want a
quick glimpse?
Yes, I would love a quick glimpse.
So last week we did defensive tackles, and I had the Bucs with the top spot, just barely edging out the Falcons. And this week, as we move to, I call them edges because it can incorporate defensive ends depending on the team's scheme. I have the Bucs ranked second. So, and then my question to you, Matt, is who do you think I would have as number one? The Saints, the Panthers, or the Falcons?
Oh man. Well, the big knock on the Falcons is that they don't have edge rushers.
Correct. Yep.
The Panthers just traded Brian Burns, so nothing can really be the Panthers. So I guess
they did sign a pretty solid guy, though. They signed Jadeveon Clowney.
Yes, that's true. That's right.
But not the Panthers, so that leaves. I have the Saints. Yeah, they signed Chase. They signed Chase Young. Carl Granderson's a very good pass rusher that a lot of people maybe don't know the name. I'm not factoring Cam Jordan really in at all. It's really the strength of those top two guys. And then they have a couple of high draft picks as their number 4 and 5 guys who have a chance to kind of step up in Isaiah Foskey and Peyton Turner, who's had trouble just staying healthy. But overall, the most accomplished group, still a high ceiling with Chase Young. So I have the Saints number 1 with the Bucs barely coming in second. So overall pass rush group, I would put the Bucs number 1 in the division when you incorporate defensive tackles and edge rushers.
All right. Well, looking forward to reading more of the details as to why that is the case. But thank you for that insight. And of course, check out Josh's articles about ranking all the positions in the NFC South. If you need to check out all of them, they're tagged in the article, so you can go and pick every single one, starting from quarterback and going the whole way. So, just another great piece of content from you. So let's keep it rolling. Talk about the outside linebackers now. This first one is quite interesting because, well, he's a rookie, and we don't necessarily know what to expect just yet. Starting out with second-round pick Chris Braswell, you have some lofty expectations for Chris Braswell.
I do.
375 pass rushing snaps, 11.5%. Pressure rate, 43 pressures, and 9.5 sacks. That is quite the number for Chris Braswell. So let me start with this. Are you expecting him to be the starter opposite of Yaya Diaby? Because Yaya got 7.5 last year, and we all know he didn't start until November. So, 9.5, I imagine he's got to get as many opportunities as possible.
Yeah, the 375 pass rush snaps, I kind of have it as him taking over from JTS as that kind of opposite of Yaya somewhere in the season. I think I have him on like a 60-40 split, basically accounting for Shaq Barrett snaps last year. Shaq Barrett and then whoever was number 3 last year. So slightly more than JTS, but close to a 50-50 snap share. Really, I think where I'm bullish is his 11.5% pressure rate, which would be a bit on the high side for a rookie. He had a 16.5% pressure rate for his career at Alabama. There's another Alabama edge rusher who was a rookie last year who had a 16.5% pressure rate for his career at Alabama, and that was Will Anderson, who had a phenomenal season, rookie season for the Texans. Now, Braswell's not I'm not saying Braswell is Will Anderson. There's a reason Will Anderson was a top 5 pick and Braswell went in the second round. But I do think that he's going to, similar to Yaya this past year, I think he's going to be the beneficiary of some easy wins, some easy sacks on stunts and loops. And from what I've watched on in terms of the Alabama tape, he's very good as a looper on stunts and twists. So I think that's going to give him a bit of an artificially high conversion rate, which is where some of that 9.5 sacks is coming from. I think I had his conversion rate at like close to 20, a little over 20%, 22.5%, whereas the league average for edge rushers is more in that 16 to 18 range. So he's the one edge rusher where I'm predicting a little bit of a higher conversion rate. That could come back to bite me in the backside, but that's kind of where I'm bullish on him. He and Kijah would be kind of where I'm putting my flag in the ground as taking a little bit of a stand that I think they're going to be better than others maybe think. Matt, I think you're muted.
Yep, I just got unmuted. I don't know how that happened. But a little bit of a side tangent. Bullish means like you're fond of someone or you're okay. I always thought bullish meant like you're kind of I'm a little hesitant on this. I'm bullish on this.
That would be bearish. It comes from the stock market.
Bearish.
So bull market is everything's going well. Bear market is uh-oh.
Gotcha. Okay. I thought you were saying uh-oh to like something. All right. A little education for Matty Diamonds over here. All right. Well, so you're very bullish on those two guys. Let me ask you this, because I was on the Pat and Aaron show on WDAE the other day, and they were kind of asking me, like, for the Bucs defense, how important is it that Braswell is like the top edge rusher, pretty much like on the other side of Yaya Diaby versus like other needs for the Bucs on defense? Because I kind of feel like, yes, obviously it's important and you want Braswell to play well if he does win the starting job. But I almost feel like it's more important that like Zion McCollum establishes himself as a top corner, or even like KJ Britt proves that he can play a full season as a starting linebacker than, you know, Braswell putting it together. Because you could always go back to JTS, or if Yaya really takes a step forward. How do you feel about that situation?
I couldn't agree more. I think the edge room is one of the deepest rooms on the Bucs roster. And because of that, if Braswell, doesn't take off year one, you have lots of other options that provide a high floor, plus a scheme that has proven it doesn't need to have a really dominant edge rusher to be somewhat effective, right? I think if you have that guy, that's when Todd Bowles' defense really kind of soars, but it's not required. We saw that over the last 2 years where they really haven't had a dominant edge rusher, but the defense has still played relatively well, at least league average, if not better.
Next on this list, we can kind of go through him quickly because he's more of a backup rotational guy, but Anthony Nelson, Steady Eddie, as Todd Bowles likes to call him. You got him for 105 pass rushing snaps, 7.5% pressure rate, 8 pressures, and 1.5 sacks. Now, Anthony Nelson has kind of been for you the anti of JTS, where Anthony Nelson kind of falls into lucky moments, recovering fumbles, getting a sack where he's completely unblocked. And it's kind of shaded where JTS has done a lot of good things, but then the end result, the fans don't see as much as like, kind of breaking it down. So I'm not saying you're anti-Anthony Nelson, but Anthony Nelson is the one thorn in your side when you're trying to prove JTS's point. And Anthony Nelson seems to get in the way of a good time.
Yeah, so I think it comes down to his like 21, 22 seasons where he just had really 2022. He had this ridiculously high conversion rate. He had 14 pressures in the entire season, which is not good. It's like a 5% pressure rate, which is like what you want out of your 4th or 5th edge rusher. And he had 6 sacks by PFF's measure. I think it was 5.5 technically by the NFL's measure, which was a close to 50% conversion rate, which was absolutely not sustainable. And all I kept saying was, it's not sustainable. he's got to get better at pressuring the quarterback on a consistent basis if you want to continue to see him get 5 to 6 sacks a season based on his play time. And there are a lot of people who are like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's like, okay, well, last season, he actually got better at pressuring the quarterback, but his conversion rate came back to kind of league average. 2 sacks and 15 pressures is right around league average conversion rate. And, kind of proved my point. JTS was the other side of that coin, that they were 2 sides to the same coin, where JTS was getting more consistent pressure, not that of like an elite edge rusher, but a solid number 2 guy. But he wasn't getting the sacks of a solid number 2 guy because his conversion rate was consistently like ridiculously low. And I was like, those 2 numbers are going to regress to the mean. And they did for both players. JTS ended up with like a 19% conversion rate last year, just a little bit above league average. And his sacks were right about what you would expect for his pressure rate. So, I don't hate Anthony Nelson at all. I think the Bucs maybe overpaid him a little bit the year that, last year when they re-signed him. But he's a useful piece. He's a very capable number 4 edge, and that's exactly what the Bucs are asking him to be at this point, as a number 4 edge.
And I feel like the Bucs can overpay for Anthony Nelson because Yaya's on a rookie deal, Braswell's on a rookie deal, Marquise Watts, who we're going to talk about next, Jose Ramirez. The only guy that isn't, but it's still a overall low contract, is Randy Gregory, and he may get cut.
I didn't even put him in my predictions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not even going to discuss Randy Gregory until we can get a picture of Randy Gregory in a Bucs jersey. We're not going to talk about Randy Gregory because this is the only picture we have of Randy Gregory. Is him and the 49ers. We have other ones of him on the Broncos, but until Randy Gregory is wearing more of a Buccaneer red and there's pewter helmet and brown pants or white pants or whatever they wear, we're not going to talk about stats for Randy Gregory because he's got to show up for practice, really. So let's keep this train rolling with Marquise Watts. A very intriguing season for Marquise Watts. I think there's going to be many Bucs fans pounding the table for Marquise Watts to get more involved. And so the projections you have for him: 145 pass rushing snaps at 13.5% of a pressure rate, 20 pressures, and 2.5 sacks. Marquise Watts was on the show quite recently, but right before 4th of July. So friend of the program, and had that big game against Tennessee. So Josh, can we get Marquise Watts in a rotation where he's on 3rd down? Can we please?
I would be all for it. If you're looking at the efficiency metrics there, the pressure rate, I have him predicted for the highest pressure rate on the team.
Yes.
I do think, based on what I saw last year, he is still just a rotational pass rusher. I question how well he'd be able to hold up on early downs as a run defender, but I'm predicting he gets 5 times the amount of snaps, pass rushing snaps, as he did last year. He only had 27 last year. For a guy to have only 27 snaps and generate the amount of buzz that Marquise Watts has, there's some talent there. So the 13.5% pressure rate would be a very high pressure rate. I kind of liken him to a very early in his career Shaq Barrett, or very early in his career Bryce Huff. These situational pass rushers, when they get on the field, they flash. The question is he going to be able to be trusted as a run defender to really start to crack into the rotation and get more snaps? The 2.5 sacks, I know a lot of people are going to see that and think it's ridiculously low, but again, it's just based on, I don't have him predicted for for much play time. The play time goes up. I think you see the pressure rate go down slightly, but the sacks continue to increase. So if he ends up getting 300, 400 snaps, pass rushing snaps, I could easily see that number jump to 7, 8, 9 sacks.
And his play may be determined by this next man, Joe Tryon Shoyinka. A big season for JTS, a contract year for him. You have 7 sacks for JTS, taking a bit bullish there on JTS.
I know.
41 pressures as well. So, yeah, please proceed with JTS.
I can't quit him. I just can't quit him. So again, this is a PFF sack. So that 7 sacks could look like 4.5 or 5.5 from a NFL.com type thing, depending on how many times somebody else gets there. I go back and I watch the tape, and last year, outside of the small little flashes from Watts, JTS was in my opinion, the Bucs' best pass rusher. The problem is that sacks are, again, the long ball of defensive stats for pass rushers. And while he was improved there, he was on his way to getting like 7 or 8 sacks when he got benched for Diaby, who, fans are going to come for my neck on this, is not as good of a pass rusher as JTS at this point in their respective careers, at least not on a consistent basis, right? And again, Diaby had an unusually high conversion rate. Also, the Bucs love to drop JTS in the coverage, and he may be the best coverage edge in football. I don't think that's going to get him paid next year, but it's a cool thing to say, right? It's like off-ball defensive tackle, right?
Yeah, so, right. It's like
coverage edge.
Like yeah, exactly. Coverage edge. It's like when Steve McClendon got an interception, when JPP got his 2 interceptions, because it's like, hey, he's got 3 fingers. He's got 3 fingers. Like, that's
Shaq
awesome.
Got his interception return for a touchdown against what was that? Chicago last year.
Yeah, week 2. That was awesome. Yeah, pick 6 for Shaq Barrett. He also had an interception. I remember it vividly. The 2019 season of the infamous Shaq Barrett 2019 season against LA, the Rams in LA. He jumped up, knocked the screen pass down, and caught it. That was a crazy game. If anyone wants to go down memory lane, look up the 2019 game, Bucs versus Rams. It was an absolute shootout. It was a great game. Yeah. But yeah, JTS, there was talks about that Joker role. I'll be interested if the Bucs aren't going to show it like in training camp too much. But I am curious if they do try to do something a little bit different with JTS, because they have that luxury to a degree, just with everybody at outside linebacker that we talked about for sure.
I would love to see him and Yaya get a few snaps as interior rushers.
Yes.
If you're going to give Vita and Cancey a break and it's a long and late down, get one of the 2 of them inside and see what they can do with their length and their power. Yaya's power, JTS's length, against some interior offensive linemen. I think it could make for some very interesting pressure packages and some cool results.
So, last but not least, an outside linebacker, Yaya Diaby. So, you've been bullish on a couple of guys here.
Yep.
Yaya, you're a little bearish.
Compared to the consensus, yes. I actually project him forward in terms of his pressure rate, but regression in terms of his sacks. And the reason for that, again, comes down to that very volatile conversion rate that I've been talking about. Last year, Yaya had, 9 sacks, I think, by PFF's measure on just 26 pressures in 293 pass rush snaps. So that's a conversion rate almost double the league average. And like I said, that tends to regress to the mean. It's not something that's repeatable unless your name is TJ Watt. So, but his overall pressure rate was 8.9%, which is not really what you want to see from a edge rusher. You want, when defensive linemen get to defensive tackles get to double digits, that's awesome. But edge rushers need to be, double digits, more of that 12 to 13% rate to be considered like a number 1 or better, right? And the really elite guys get over 15%.
Yeah.
So I'm projecting him to go up from 8.9% to like 9.5%. So a small step forward. The pressures go forward because more pass rush snaps. So I think I have him increasing his pressures by almost 33 to 35%. But the sacks to go back by a couple because I'm not confident that he's going to continue to convert at this ridiculously high level, just like I didn't think Anthony Nelson would continue to convert at a ridiculously high level from 2 years ago last year. So that's really all that it is. The aggregate of this edge room, I think, is solid, but again, no elite guy among them.
So for Yaya, do you look at it as like progress that, he's getting the pressure rate up a little bit, or obviously
Progress
not
on process. Yeah, progress on process.
Because Yaya had 7.5 sacks last year. So really, he's just losing a half a sack in terms
Yeah,
of.
yeah, again, like for me, that 7 sacks could look a little bit different when you see it on Pro Football Reference or ESPN or NFL.com. That 7 could look like 4.5 to 5.5 based on how often he gets to the quarterback at the same time somebody else does. So again, it's measured by that Pro Football Focus type of sacks. In terms of, I think he's going to get to the quarterback while the quarterback still has the ball in his hands 7 times, right? Whether somebody else gets there or not, I can't control for that in my projections. So I do think that's a small step backwards from a result standpoint, but I try to look at the process over the results. Small step forward in process. I think that there is a defined ceiling with Yaya because I think he's a very linear rusher. I don't think that he corners well in terms of his bend, and I think that limits what his overall ceiling can be. But there's a lot of things that he can do to improve his process because he only really won with a bull rush and a little bit of a cross chop last year. If he starts finding an inside move, maybe an inside swim or a push pull, or just develops an idea of what he's doing, because he really was kind of like a bull in a china shop. He just kind of launched himself forward. But if he starts to learn how to win against tackles with technique, then that's when you're going to see the pressure start to raise and more consistent sack totals from him. But based on what I saw last year and projecting it was his rookie year, the small step forward, I do think progress in terms of process, but a decline or a regression to the mean when you look at that final sack number. But the big thing is and what I really want to kind of get through to say to fans, yes, sacks are extremely important. I'm not trying to say they're not, but a player is much more than 8 to 10 plays a year. Right. We're talking, all of these guys, we're talking in most of them, hundreds of pass rush snaps. That's not even their run defense, right? Hundreds and hundreds of pass rush snaps. And there's more to being a pass rusher than just the sacks. The sacks are the ultimate culmination, but there's so much more in terms of creating pressure. Consistent pressure leads to interceptions, right?
Yes.
The best intercepting teams.
And just bad decisions by the offense.
Yeah, the highest correlating factor to interceptions year over year isn't the ability of the coverage players. It's actually the ability of the pass rushers to force bad decisions from quarterbacks. So that's kind of what I'm getting at from that. It's more than just somewhere between 4 and 15 plays a year, which show up as sacks. It's those pressures. That's what you want to see, because over enough time, if you get a pressure consistently, the sack numbers will come.
It's a great point and really well said, Josh. So that's going to wrap it up for the defensive tackles and outside linebackers. But wait, there's more. We're saving one more, the best for last. We can't do these projections without talking about the best defensive player on defense. A man that got a lot of sacks for the Bucs last year. Of course, safety Antoine Winfield Jr. So you have Antoine with 50 pass rush snaps. 24% of a pressure rate, 12 pressures, and 3 sacks for Antoine Winfield Jr. I find it extremely difficult to really imagine what Antoine Winfield Jr. is going to do, because 3 sacks is, it's 3 less than what he did last year. But, if that means he's in coverage more and he's turning the ball over, or maybe he leads the league again in forced fumbles, less sacks for Antoine Winfield Jr. doesn't mean he had a worse year. It just means probably that Todd Bowles asked him to do other things. So really, how'd you conjure up this one? Because I feel like safety is way tougher to do than, the D-line and outside linebacker.
Yeah, this is I have the lowest confidence level on this one, if you will. He's had 2 seasons where he's hit 50 pass rush snaps. That was his rookie season, and then last year. Last year was by far his best pass rushing season. Just in terms of volume combined with efficiency. You see that pressure rate is ridiculously high compared to anybody else we've talked about. And it should be, because the idea is that he's coming in as a surprise, right, for the offense.
Yes.
And typically you see that his entire career, his pressure rate, I think, has been well above 20%. And then I kind of just guessed at the conversion rate at 25% of his pressures turn into sacks.
Sure.
Last year he had 18 pressures and 6 sacks. That was a 33% conversion rate. Again, conversion rates are the most volatile part of that. So a little bit of a hedge there that'll regress down a little bit. Like I said, lowest confidence interval. But if that is what, his production is as a pass rusher, that's still an extremely high-end season for a safety as a pass rusher. What's really I want to encourage Bucs fans to appreciate what they have in Antoine Winfield Jr. He literally does it all. Like, he's an elite pass rusher as a safety. He's great in coverage. He's one of the few safeties in this league that can still run, that you feel comfortable running single high in an increasingly too high world. He's an amazing run defender. Like, anything you ask him to do, and he's so smart. He's instinctually very close to what Levante David is. Appreciate him, because players like this do not come along very often. So enjoy it while he's hitting his prime.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, greatness like this only comes along so often, and he's the best safety in the league. And it was incredible what he did last season. I think he'll be able to keep it up this season in different ways. And I think this defense is even better this year. And obviously, Antoine Winfield Jr. is going to be a big part of it. So that's all the projections for the pass rushing for the Bucs this season. We got another fun episode on deck tomorrow as we talk about the Bucs sleepers on offense and defense that you should be paying attention to when training camp comes up in a couple of weeks. So that's tomorrow's show. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on all of our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram at Pewter Report. And our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV, where we have the podcast, Pewter Pulses, various reaction videos and things from press conferences and practice, and a lot more to come as well when training camp arrives. So that's going to do it for us on today's show. Make sure you please like and subscribe, leave a comment as well. We got a lot of people watching right now, so hit that like button, leave a comment once this wraps up. So for Josh Queipo, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.